Usually when you get hired for a film as a composer, they don't even address the issue until after the director is already editing the film. My relationship with Wes has been such that each film, we've gotten involved closer to the very beginning. And as a matter of fact, on this particular film, Life Aquatic, he was sitting on this couch here with a laptop working on the script still, and I was writing music for the film at the same time. Because, for instance, there's a composer inside the movie. We were talking about what kind of music he would write. The situation with Team Zissou, how they had fallen considerably in the last, 20, 25 years. And so they were still using a lot of the same gear. They're editing on an old style chem table, and almost everybody's gone over to computers now. And so it's almost like an outdated technique. They're recording on what looks like analog multi-track quarter-inch wide tape. Those machines are all sitting in pawn shops now. And, he's the composer Wolodarsky, he's using old synths like Casios from that time period. They haven't upgraded yet, he hasn't upgraded in 25 years probably on his recording gear. We were talking about bands that were happening then, and Wes was talking about this New York band called Suicide that was around back then, and I knew them. Devo played on the same bill with them at Max's Kansas City in New York City, and I was a big fan of them. I thought they were great. Everything was very simple. 2 or 3 synths and a drum machine and an Echoplex, went a long way in their band.
We could pipe in some music.
And so, I was playing things for Wes, and he kept saying, make it sound more like a Casio. He wanted it to sound, he had a very specific sound in mind. And so I went through a lot of kind of old retro sounds and started pulling out analog synthesizers from the basement here. I have a collection that, of course, it dates back to Devo, days. My first Moog synthesizer I got like in 1970 or something. So we started pulling synths out of the basement and setting them up around the room. A long table that went the whole length of the room, and there was a row of synths from the 70s, like Oberheims, ARPs, Mini Moogs, EMLs, EMSs, and we just pulled a bunch of stuff out and picked the ones that we liked the best. I always loved film, and I always loved the music in films. When I was younger, in the 70s, I didn't have a VHS player, but I would take my answering machine and I would put 90-minute tapes in it so I could record the soundtrack off of my TV of films. So unfortunately, I'd end up with commercials too, but you'd get to hear, you could close your eyes and you'd be like watching the film. It was when Devo signed a stupid record deal. When I started getting offers from people to score things, commercials and TV shows and films, I was kind of like, well, why not? I think what attracted me to film scoring and TV scoring was the immediacy of it. My first TV scoring job was Pee-wee's Playhouse. I was getting an episode of TV sent to me on a Tuesday. I would score it on Wednesday and record it. I'd write all the music on Wednesday and then record everything on Thursday. They'd have it on Friday morning back in New York, and we'd watch it on TV on Saturday. So there was something about that immediate turnaround that's what initially sucked me into it. But I know why for me it seemed to be an okay fit, because a lot of musicians come out of bands, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work trying to get into commercials, TV, or film, but it really involves a collaborative effort, and I think my band, Devo, was a collaborative effort. It was 2 sets of brothers, and it didn't matter who wrote the basis for a song. If it was my brother, Jerry, or myself, we all had a say in it, and everybody had a voice in the band, and we were used to, like, working together for something bigger. So the idea of working with a director was appealing to me and was not foreign. And the nice thing is that the 2 Bobs from Devo, my brother and Jerry's brother, both work here every day. My brother Bob scores Rugrats for a number of years now, and he's done some films of his own, but he's always over in the next door every day working on his stuff. And Bob Casale is our engineer for both of us. And so it's kind of nice to have this relationship with guys that you started working with in 1972. So that's like over 30 years ago that we first started, starting towards Devo, and we've been working together that long, and it still continues. I'm going to show you like a 10 bars out of this cue from Royal Tenenbaums. This cue is Anjelica Huston and Gene Hackman walking in the park. This is just an early sketch.
You always put them first, didn't you?
I tried to. Lately, I feel like maybe I didn't do such a great job.
God damn it, don't do that to yourself.
I just found this thing in my computer where I could take a score and make a musical palindrome by flipping the score upside down, and so you could play the score backwards. Wes and I took that cue and turned it backwards for Life Aquatic, and it's actually the same notes if you just were to look in a mirror and read the paper off of a mirror and play what you were seeing in a mirror. So that first bar is the very end of the last bar we just heard, so it's like...
The Belafonte was a long-range sub-hunter during the Second World War, which we bought from the U.S. Navy for $900,000.
We changed instruments and made them a little more electronic, but you still get the same kind of upness to it, the kind of light and happiness that you have in the Royal Tenenbaum cue. It was interesting because it was a little less predictable of a melody played in reverse. It not only worked, but it actually set a tone for the music that was going to get written in Life Aquatic, because we were looking for slightly unexpected rhythms and phrasings for melodies. Although with Rushmore and Tenenbaums, we've always had like a classical reference. This was the first real departure into electronic instruments at all. Although I do a lot of the original composing of the score on a computer, we've never used a non-acoustic instrument in any of the scores until this movie. This was the first time, and it was the whole Wolodarsky thing that did it.
Let's try track 3 against picture.
I wrote some themes that were for the movie inside the movie, just with the all synths the first time you'd hear them. And then later on, when things became real, there's music that you'd originally heard as synth sounds that start off with orchestral instruments. Wes said, I want them to sound as much like Casios as you can. So that became an interesting exercise. Okay, I want you to sound like a cheap Casio synthesizer. Players the day before, they were probably playing on a James Horner movie, and maybe the day after on a John Williams. The idea was to have the orchestra sound as small and electronic as possible, and then by the time they're going across the field, it's kind of changed over to big orchestral sounds, playing the same music that had come out of Casio sounds earlier in the movie. What was nice about it is it created adventure music that didn't sound like it came out of another movie. It had both a classic feel, but yet it was very unique to the universe that these people were floating around in, you know, this kind of fantasy world of Wes's. We listened to music together. We recommend pieces to each other. He picked pieces that he said he wanted me to listen to. In the last 3 films, there's been something classical that was kind of a reference point, and we deconstructed it from there. In Rushmore, it was Vivaldi. Vivaldi has kind of operatic and dramatic kind of connotations to it, and kind of a nice energy that fit kind of the twists and turns of the film. With Royal Tenenbaums, it was French Impressionist. A little more sophisticated, and things like Ravel and Satie. With this movie, it was our good old favorite German bee composer. It introduces the La Questo Festival. the first 10 bars come out of the world of German music. He liked this piece because it sounded like a film festival. It had a festive pomp and circumstance kind of feel to it. And goes into when the little boy with the crayon ponyfish is introduced by William Dafoe.
This is my little nephew, Werner. He wanted to meet you.
It goes through a little bit of Tyrolean folk music or something.
A crayon ponyfish. Wow.
By working on all 4 of his movies, I've had this wonderful chance to watch him grow as far as his musical knowledge and his sophistication. So I think the instrumentation for each of the movies, starting with Bottle Rocket on, I think they've grown as Wes has grown. We used a few woodwinds and strings in Bottle Rocket, and we added on to that when we did Rushmore because we were listening to Vivaldi and kind of upped the symphonic nature of the orchestra. I remember when I did Rushmore, I was thinking, from my previous experience with Wes, and it was only my second movie, I already knew that he didn't like instruments that played lower tones at the time. At that time in his life, he liked higher frequencies. I found out on Bottle Rocket that he liked mandolins, he liked piccolos and flutes, celeste, because celeste had another connotation for me. I thought of celeste as Mr. Rogers and kind of wrote it off, and he made me think about celeste and harpsichord. Walking around here, you'll notice now I own 2 or 3 celestes and I own at least 3 harpsichords, but we'd still not used brass. And the reason we hadn't is because he didn't want to open his musical universe up that big. He didn't really want a brass sound. But on Royal Tannenbaums, I remember putting a trombone swell. Wes goes, "What was that?" when he heard it the first time. I go, "It was a trombone."
Look at that old grizzly bear.
We started putting brass in a few here and there, and by the time we got to this movie, and so we've kind of pretty much added a full orchestra to our repertoire now, so I think sky's the limit for the next one. We still have never left this room to go score somewhere else. I think he feels safe when we're in my studio, and orchestra for the big scenes in this had like 35, 45 people. I can't remember exactly how many tracks are on it. And we had to record people by tag team, in this little room over here. This is the room. There were many people here that played for the benefit of Wes Anderson movies over the years. And sometimes, but it is jerry-rigged. It's like in that room over there that's dark right now, we'll stick a bassoon player or an oboe player and shut them off in there, and then the piano player's over in this little room over here on the other side, and we make do. It's really meant for a small group of people to work, and so, it took us like 2 or 3 days to record what you could have done in 3 hours in a Sony soundstage or something like that. Get a 50-piece orchestra in for Life Aquatic. Not all at once. I was ready to go to a bigger orchestra for Royal Tannenbaums. It was kind of bugging me because, it was kind of weird that we were just growing, a little bit of orchestra at a time, and I had been doing these other films with 110-piece orchestras over in London, and I just thought, oh my God, if Wes ever gets to do that with me, if we ever go over to London and use a big orchestra, it's such a rush to hear that many people playing your music. But on the other hand, it sounds very unique because of it. Everything then became very close mic'd, and it became a special sound that doesn't really sound like other orchestras necessarily. Even if they don't tell you this, here's what composers think about when songs are put in movies. They hate them. And the biggest reason why is because the songs are usually, a record company wants to make that a hit single. Well, what do they want to do? Their interests are, they say, well, you got to put it, it the most dramatic part of the movie. You got to put it somewhere really important. So it's like, so they carve out these big, important chunks of the film, and you're left with helping, the weaker scenes of the film where they go, hey, everybody was tired that day, and can you put something in that speeds up the scene, or can this guy was supposed to be, menacing in this scene, and he didn't do his work, so can you put something dark in so that people know you're not supposed to be laughing at him? Oftentimes when songs are chosen for movies, they come from the school of pun or the school of non-ironic lyrics where, it's like, if somebody, is putting on a bow tie, somewhere they go and have this software where they can go, he's putting on a red bow tie. And then they look for a song, and it doesn't matter if it's Slayer or if it's Alison Krauss or if it's the Beatles or if it's Henry Mancini. If somebody wrote a song that has those lyrics in it, they'll try and put it in the movie, and it's embarrassing. Wes is really the mastermind behind, the song choice for his films. He takes such care in what songs he puts in his movies. I think that's why his soundtracks get such a good critical response from people. Songs aren't your favorite thing as a composer, but on the other hand, I gotta say, I think it was a stroke of genius to have the Portuguese versions of the David Bowie songs in this movie. He's kind of like a Greek chorus where he comments on the action throughout the film, and you keep coming back to this guy. There's these songs that are familiar, but you're like, is he speaking in tongues? What the hell's going on? The score has a slightly different function than the songs. The songs, like underline specific scenes, and the score is kind of like a thread that holds things together. It's interesting, though, I gotta say, though, that's contradicted with this movie with Sao Jorge. It's almost like it's one piece. I think it's all acoustic guitar and one voice on all of those Bowie songs. Working with Wes reminds me of what it was like to be in Devo in the early days. It was 1973, I think. We had read something in Popular Mechanics that they said, laser discs, everybody will have them next year. I remember seeing a picture of it, and it was the exact same size as an LP, but it not only had sound, it had vision. Oh my God. I remember thinking, this is the death of rock and roll. Rock and roll can die, and something new is gonna happen, and I want to be part of it. And that's how the Devo guys felt. We thought that, sorry for all these people that play rock and roll, because we're going to do something different, and we're going to do something new. We're doing sound and vision. We'd make these short films, and we didn't know what to do with them, so we put them in film festivals. And we were thinking of people like Andy Warhol. He was a photographer, a filmmaker, a painter. He designed clothes. He produced the Velvet Underground. And something about Wes, his energy, and the way he worked, and the people that he brought around him, it made me feel like it was the middle 70s again. It made me feel like how I felt like when we were just so excited about doing the art, and something about working with Wes, his enthusiasm, I identified with that energy, and like the Wilson brothers were so excited when they first came out here, and they did Bottle Rocket, and I liked the people that were around him, and he seemed so unaffected,